The Indian FTR is a unique motorcycle designed for the joy of riding and to look good. This is my 2019 Indian FTR1200S Race Replica. In this video, I'll tell my opinion about how we got to have a motorcycle like the FTR in the market, why I bought my FTR, and I'll offer my thoughts about it after a few years of ownership, and I'll give you my opinion about what is it really. I'll end this video with my FTR's photo shoot in the desert, including a 1-minute video I created during that photo shoot. You can skip to the parts that interest you. The chapters are marked in the timeline below. Buying a motorcycle in the United States is primarily about buying into a lifestyle. Of course, some Americans use their motorcycles for transportation, but the majority of us here in the United States buy motorcycles just for the joy of riding. It's a lifestyle choice. In most other countries in Europe, South America, and the rest of the so-called Western world, consumers are also increasingly viewing motorcycles more as a lifestyle purchase. Yes, motorcycles remain a great, cheap, and efficient means of transportation in congested towns in those countries. If you want pizza, medicine, or need to ship documents across town, you call a motorboy. It helps that everywhere in the world outside of the United States, you can filter through traffic. Well, you can do it in California, but that's it here in the United States. Even in some areas of Asia, where motorcycles remain one of the absolute most effective forms of transportation in crowded urban centers, where riding a small motorcycle is the best way to efficiently go from place to place, motorcycles in Asia are also becoming a lifestyle choice. This motorcycle trend from basic transportation to a lifestyle choice is a reflection of a growing middle class across the world. And as a consequence, people transition from motorcycles to cars for transportation. And the motorcycle industry has been adapting to this change. Of course, the industry still produces motorcycles dedicated to daily urban transportation jobs, such as scooters and small standard motorcycles, but even those are getting fancy. But most importantly, the industry has been increasing the share of motorcycles in showrooms that have other jobs, such as cruisers, sports bikes of all sizes, adventure motorcycles of all sizes, sports touring, dual sports, the gamut. Adventure motorcycles, for example, continue to grow their share in the market, and in the last decades, the industry has also expanded the product line towards motorcycles with no specific jobs, inspired in part by the value created by owners who modify or restore old, well, let's say vintage motorcycles. These jobless bikes are the so-called naked, heritage, or classic bikes, or even scramblers. They are modern and retro-looking machines whose function is to look good and deliver the joy of riding. My FTR 1200 is a point in question. It is the pinnacle of uselessness. It's a motorcycle with no specific job, except for delivering the rider the purest joy of riding. And even at that, the Indian FTR models, similar to mine, from 2019 to 2021 model years, deliver a particular joy of riding that's not applicable to everyone, what with a 19-inch front wheel and dirt track tires. And despite being compact, it's a heavy motorcycle. But it compensates by delivering torque, the sounds, the experience of riding an American V-twin. Well, and it is easy on the eye. I find it impossible to walk away from it without turning my head for several last looks. As mentioned before, guys modifying their standard bikes, turning them into dirt machines or scramblers, have been a side story and a push and pull influence that shaped the motorcycle industry. The industry adopted these ideas along the way, and scramblers got hot in the 60s, then again in the early 70s. In the 80s, we got into the Dakar-inspired bikes, which then became dual sports and adventure motorcycles, and the scrambler movement cooled down. But sometime in the 2000s, well, I don't know if it ever died. But the Scrambler movement got hot again in the last couple of decades, to a point that in 2015, Ducati created its own new brand with the Scrambler name. Ducati's Scramblers were launched as a revival for models from the 60s and targeted new riders. Triumph never lost the classic look. Then came the BMW R9T, and I had a chance to meet designer Ola Stengard, who worked on the R9T project, and eventually BMW made a Scrambler model of the R9T line. But the FTR is not quite a Scrambler. The FTR name spells flat track racer.
Indian versus Yamaha in the top two spots, and then it's Robinson back here on another Indian.
Have you seen On Any Sunday? This film was released in 1971. If for some reason you never saw this movie and you are a rider, and especially if you like riding on dirt, I strongly recommend you watch it. Besides Steve McQueen, the legend, the film includes Malcolm Smith and Mert Lowell, among other legends. The film shows the kinds of popular races we used to have during those days, including flat track racing. I believe during the time of filming of Any Sunday, the late 60s and early 70s, was when flat track racing got its third coming. Flat track racing started around World War I on board tracks, but became more popular when they moved to dirt tracks after World War II. The flat track racing rivalry between Indian and Harley-Davidson before and after other manufacturers entered the fray shaped then and still shapes today the American motorcycle history. About 10 years ago, flat track racing got popular again, which was reflected in the One Motor Show in Portland, Oregon. I thought those flat track builds were the coolest bikes, and the Indian resurgence with Polaris was intertwined with this movement, rescuing old times, building a 750 competitive flat track racer. This 750, produced and sold for racers only, became very popular. People clamored for it to be built for regular customers. So at some point, Ola Stengard, whom I mentioned before, jumped from BMW to Indian and worked on the design of the FTR replica project. I saw the final result, the Indian FTR1200, for the first time at the One Motor Show in Portland, and I really liked what I saw. It got really problematic for me when a few months later I took one for a test drive. I say problematic because I was hooked. The first twist of the throttle and that acceleration, the sounds, the V-twin vibrations, and well, somehow my name appeared on a waiting list for the S model, a race replica version. This was 2019. I also had my name on a waiting list for the KTM 790R. The KTM arrived earlier, so I removed my name from the waiting list for the FTR. But a couple of years later, we were emerging from that period when we were all working from home. You know the time I'm talking about. And the folks from the local Indian dealer called me to tell me about a great factory incentive for a new, still in the box, 2019 model. I could not refuse the offered number. I got my truck and trailer and picked it up. When I bought the FTR, I already included an official FTR accessory, which was part of the deal. I chose the number plates, which makes the front end look better than with that headlight cowl. I also got a smaller, better sounding and better looking slip-on exhaust and a tail tidy. Smaller mirrors will be next. By the way, I chose the number 68 because that was the number I was assigned to by the organizer of my first enduro race. So what is this motorcycle after all? Obviously the name says flat track racer, but what is it really? I view it as a street bike modified to look like a flat track racer, but which was born already modified. Although it is an official factory mass-produced motorcycle, it does have touches of a shed-built bike. It has pro taper handlebars and a dashboard placed on top of the handlebars that seems like an adapted, off-the-shelf dash. And then it has 19-inch wheels with flat-track rubber. Then there is the exposed frame as well. I like it because it does look like a bare-bones modified machine, but one that was made by someone who does excellent work and improve upon the original. That's because underneath this shed-built appearance, the motorcycle is complete, as any factory-built machine should be at this price point. The S model comes with fully adjustable shock and forks, Brembo brakes, and a full set of electronics including cruise control, Bosch cornering ABS, traction control, engine modes, and a few other items. So, what kind of riders buy this motorcycle? A few people have bought it and modified it to do actual flat track racing, or even road racing. But in its off-the-showroom form, it's better described as an urban machine for an occasional trip to the hills around town. That's why I bought it. Like some people have mentioned about this and other similar motorcycles, if you mostly ride in urban areas, it could be your only motorcycle. But if you are more eclectic on your riding habits, it works better if it is a second or third or whatever number motorcycle you want it to be. Personally, I see it as the ultimate ride for the joy of it machine. There's nothing practical about it. You can travel with it, but you will be blasted by winds if you decide to go any faster than 70 miles per hour. You don't have a place to put your travel bags. You could buy accessories, a rear rack or a side rack, but any modification you make to it to make it more utilitarian and the bike looks funny, in my opinion. The tank is peanut size. At about 100 miles you are on reserve. You can ride it on dirt, but it is not meant to travel on anything that is not flat terrain. It's even on the name, flat track. Like I mentioned before, it could be a fun commuter bike with a caveat or two. Ultimately though, I see it as a hot rod, as in an American muscle motorcycle, a motorcycle that you ride for its sounds, to experience the torque and pure riding sensations, but not to experience its performance in the mountain roads or not to ride it off-road either. Indian stuffed a big motor in a compact frame. You sit right on top of it. It's a hooligan beast. I'm someone who looks at torque figures before I look at horsepower. Torque defines how a twist of the throttle translates into motion. The sensation I got when I test rode it, and I loved it for that. A few years after the 2019 launch, Indian modified it. Since the 2022 model, it comes with 17-inch wheels. People report this change modified completely its behavior on the mountain roads. It probably now rides more like a naked bike, more of a sports vibe. Some people who have the 19-inch wheel model, like mine, have gotten rid of the flat track tires and put more street-oriented tires on it. They also say it improved its handling. Well, for me, it would destroy its character. This changes modify its original design. I kept my motorcycle original in that regard, and I plan to keep it that way. I like my flat track Race Replica the way it is. And I also like its Indian classic look with the Indian color scheme. It's more of an icon that way. I like that my FTR remains the unique motorcycle it was conceptualized to be. Besides the issues about handling, which you would expect from a motorcycle with a 19-inch front wheel and dirt track tires, my motorcycle, which has a little over 1,000 miles on the clock, has had 2 recalls. Besides that, it is short-blooded, meaning it takes a good while for the motor to really feel settled and ready to ride. The dash is positioned too low, making it difficult to get the basic information you need when on a ride. The dash also takes its time to load the gauges, and there is this warning that comes up all the time. We must have short-term memory to have to read it every time we turn it on. Other than that, the FTR is easy to maintain. I change the oil every year. Indian organizes an oil change kit. It makes it simple. Overall, there is nothing like this motorcycle on the market today. The new FTRs can't match what this is. I don't think my 2019 FTR can be compared to anything out there. I'm not saying it is better or not as good as, for example, a BMW R9T or the Triumph Scramblers or Ducati's Scramblers. It's just that it is unique among these modern creations, both on how it looks and how it rides. As I mentioned before, I hear the new FTRs with a 17-inch front wheels and street tires perform better and might offer a better comparison to other Scramblers and retro classic machines. But I think the 17-inch wheel size messes up with the proportions of the motorcycle. My FTR remains unique in its looks and on being the American hot rod of motorcycles. But is it good for everyone? No. But then again, I call it the pinnacle of uselessness. Owning and riding one is an experience to be had. In 2021, I took it to the desert for a photo shoot. I took it to my favorite place in the state. I was basically all alone with my truck, trailer, the KTM, and the FTR. And I had the greatest time while there. The idea was to document the FTR in its conceptual element, a flat track or dirt surface. Please indulge me on this last story, and then I'll share a 1-minute video I made of this photo shoot in the desert to conclude this video. During those days in the fall of 2021, most people were not venturing out yet. I basically had the playa all to myself. It was a bit scary, being almost all alone in this barren and remote area of the country. But at least I had phone coverage and in reach, plenty of water and food supplies, and 3 options of vehicles to extricate myself from the location. The only thing is that I had to be careful while riding. There was no room for mistakes. It was not about taking chances. I don't know if I'll ever be there when the playa will be that empty again. What an experience it was. That was September Labor Day weekend, and during the day that year between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. I could not do anything. It was just too hot. So in the morning I would ride the FTR and make videos with it using drones and action cameras. When it would get too hot, with no shade in sight. And inside the trailer it was too hot. The only thing to do was to take a motorcycle for a ride and get some air flowing. When riding, I would not feel the heat, so I would go to Fields for a burger or to the local hot springs. At around 4 p.m., I would come back to camp, sit in the now growing shade of the trailer, check in with the world, and wait for the cooler temps and for the right light to arrive. In the late afternoon, that's when the static photo shoot happened. I would set up the cameras, lights, and get into action. Every minute counts when daylight changes to sunset and its gradient of colors change fast. When all was done, I got ready to go back home. There are a few things I mention in almost all my videos. One is that my preferred riding surface is dirt and gravel roads, preferably in the desert. Second, I love my trailer. It was a cheap and lightweight alternative to a toy hauler. It doesn't have the comfort of a real travel trailer, but it works very well for me. I love it that when all is said and done, I just load the bikes and I'm ready to go home in the comfort of my old but fully operational F-150, which has great air conditioning. One of my next videos will be about this trailer. So here is the 1-minute video of my FTR1200S Race Replica Desert photo shoot. I made it for Instagram in 2021 and with which I will end this video. Thank you for watching. If you are still here, please subscribe or at least give this video a like. Thanks.